Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we're very excited today to be able to talk a little bit about how we can use cloud apps to help accelerate our cloud journeys. I'm joined today by Archana Venkatraman, who is an analyst from IDC, whose primary research coverage is around cloud governance, cloud data management, cloud ops, FinOps. She's also an active contributor to IDC's European Digital Innovation Research. I'm John Bach, VP of Marketing for the Spot by NetApp portfolio at NetApp. And we're very excited to be able to talk about how cloud apps is relevant to the key challenges you're facing, as well as to the key initiatives that you're working to drive. So with that, I will turn that over to Archana. If you at any time have questions, feel free to enter those in the Q&A. We will try to see if we have time to answer a few questions at the end, but certainly if we aren't able to get to those questions, we will follow up with you afterwards. So Archana, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. It is a great pleasure to be here. And it very much is a topic that's gaining a lot of traction in the conversations we are having with the C-suite. So I'm very excited to share the research that we have with all of you today. Just before we talk about cloud ops and why it's important, we need to understand that we are very much entering the next wave of cloud adoption, where it's not just about cloud migration, but operations and governance is becoming equally important. They have an equal seat at the table and a voice at the table. So we can discuss the little bit of the context in which cloud adoption decisions are happening, and then see why cloud ops is so important. Just to set the context a little bit, organizations are going through these storms of disruptions, right? It started with the pandemic. When it hit, organizations were recalibrating themselves to this new normal. They enabled a lot of hybrid working, they adopted a lot of cloud computing technologies, and they were just trying to overcome the crisis. But as we moved to 2021 and 2022, companies were facing polycrisis environment, right? This is what the World Economic Forum calls it. It's very much a polycrisis world. It's not one crisis that organizations are dealing with. They have to deal with multiple crises. They have to look at the supply chain crisis. They have to look at the skills shortages. There's energy crisis. There's inflation. A recession has almost hit some countries here in Europe. But when we do a C-suite survey, 75% of organizations are expecting recession in the first half of this year. So companies are very much preparing to overcome these multiple storms of disruptions or polycrisis, and they're thinking that this is now becoming a normality, right? This is the normal operating model that we have to overcome on a daily basis. And what that does is they're now looking at technology as a way to navigate through these storms of disruptions. So we did a survey and asked organizations, how are your 2023 IT budgets looking? So it's surprising to see that when they are trying to cut budgets across the board on a lot of things, they are trying to make sure that their IT investment remains resilient. And that's because they see technology as a way to overcome the challenges that they are facing. So a lot of organizations are either increasing their IT budget by around 10% or a lot more than 10%, and some of them are maintaining it at the same rate that they did in the last year, which already was slightly higher because after the pandemic, we saw that IT budgets were anyway up. And very few organizations are decreasing their IT budgets. We see these organizations as lower in terms of their digital maturity. Although IT budgets are growing, it's not being spent across the board like it was in the past. Companies are going through this great era of reprioritization. And they are looking at investing in technologies that is yielding payback in the ways that they want to improve the business. So the three things that stands out from our research is that organizations are prioritizing investment in cloud, in data technologies, and in security technologies. They think that a combination of these three and prioritizing investment in these three is what's going to help them navigate through those storms of disruption. And cloud investments are continuing amid economic uncertainties as well. So ever since the pandemic, we have done an end user survey every fortnight. And what we're beginning to see that accelerated cloud adoption is one of the top priorities listed in every survey. Even though companies are worried about inflation, tech spend is definitely growing, and cloud remains very much a priority. Even for European organizations that were a lot more conservative, even they are saying that public cloud-based IR spending is one of their top priorities. And that's because of the benefits that public cloud is bringing to the business. Companies are reporting higher business and IT productivity. They're finding a lot more efficient and rapid software development. So they're able to enable and empower their developer teams. They're able to reduce the risks related to data security as well. And we have always seen cloud being, in many cases, not just a hurdle for security, but in many cases, even a driver for security, where companies think that when I look at the infrastructure and logical security, I actually feel that a lot more confident about investing in cloud, because the layer of security there is stronger than anything I can invest in terms of my data center environment. So actually reducing risks related to data security is one of the reasons organizations are adopting the cloud. And of course, it brings in agile organizational culture, better collaboration, and better customer experience and customer loyalty, because organizations are able to scale their front-end applications and leverage a lot more intelligent capabilities in the cloud to create those personalized user experiences. So if you look at the benefits of public cloud, they're wide-ranging, and companies want to benefit from all of these. But as cloud adoption continues to rise, it's not business as usual. What then ends up happening is this reality of the cloud that that organizations find themselves in. They start their cloud journey, they move certain low-hanging fruits up to the cloud, and then they see the benefits in the cloud, and then there is this need to do a lot more, and companies look at migrating their crown jewels into the cloud. They're looking at modernizing their key applications. They're looking at building a lot new cloud-native applications that are important for the business. And as they do that, they get into this messy middle. The messy middle is characterized by a lot more considerations that organizations now need to think about, because cloud is an operating model for their business. It's no longer just an additional technology layer. It is the operating model for business. You have additional considerations around security, sovereignty, cloud skills is a very important one. Complexity, sustainability, regulations to make sure that organizations are meeting their data privacy requirements clearly. And also costs. Companies are beginning to realize that cloud costs are spiraling, and they need to make sure that they are in control of their cloud costs, because essentially cloud democratizes access to resources. And when that happens at scale, the IT teams need some mechanism to control, manage, and optimize that cloud environment so that they can continue to empower the business and developers. So cost management is becoming a key consideration. We did a quick CIO poll, and last year was all about resilience, and we saw that efficiency has been rated as the word of the year by the CIOs. And it's very fitting, right? We saw what is happening in the macroeconomic layer. There's recession, there's energy price rises, there's inflation. Companies are really looking at efficiency. When we drill down a little bit more to ask them, are they really looking to cut costs? And as they reprioritize their IT budgets, where are they cutting? We realize that it's not about cutting costs in the cloud, like not going to the cloud, but it's about how do I optimize my investment? How do I get maximum value for money? So the conversations around efficiency are very much around value realization and value maximization. IT and business users are very much under pressure today to optimize their investments because they are seeing that all the economic disruption, all the regulatory disruption, as well as the commercial disruption is actually making them show their value to the business and over time really become a zero cost center, right? They want to make sure they make the right investment decisions and are able to show back and charge back to the business on how they are using the technology to create those business outputs, so that the IT teams themselves just become service brokers and deliver great service level experience. So that's where organizations are trying to get to. And cloud, optimizing cloud investment is extremely key to that. And I love this quote by a CIO from a large global multinational company. where they were saying how all their products that they sell, all the appliances that they sell are smart appliances, and that is connected to the cloud. So every time they sell something, they require a lot more connectivity, a lot more management capabilities, a lot more cloud capacity, and the list goes on. And IT need to make sure that they provision for all this and budget for all this, because customer experience is very important for them. And that's why cloud ops is such an important topic, right? Cloud ops and governance means you're thinking about all these optimization requirements and making those cloud adoption decisions, thinking about it in a very holistic way. When we look at cloud ops, it's very much about enabling autonomous operations for an intelligent cloud. Companies are looking at cloud as a very dynamic environment. What they are ultimately trying to get to is to have a lot of optimized, controlled, cloud-based environment where the governance covers data management, but it also covers self-regulated infrastructure, better planning and operations, as well as transitioning that skill. So change management and all those capabilities are very important to run that intelligent cloud environment. So there are 4 aspects to autonomous operations. It starts with monitoring the environment, getting visibility into your cloud environment. It's very much the first step. Sometimes when we talk to C-suite executives, there's very little understanding on how much of their applications are actually in the cloud. So there's a lot of misjudgment. Companies think that when even you take things like container environments, companies or CIOs think that maybe 20% of their estate is running on containers today, but when they actually do an assessment, it's well over 50%. And a lot of that is also production environments. So the first thing is very much monitoring that cloud environment, because without monitoring, without understanding, it's very difficult to manage. And then it leads to benchmarking your environment, and then you execute, you monitor, you create those benchmark requirements or best practices, and then you work towards implementing and executing on those, and then scaling it to operate at a large scale. And then that cycle continues, because once you operate, cloud is a very dynamic world. There are newer resources coming in, there are newer personas coming in. So you keep that as a continuous loop. You continue to monitor, you continue to revise your benchmarking and execution strategies, and you continue to operate and optimize. So we look at cloud ops as being extremely essential for cloud success in this new wave of cloud adoption. And FinOps within that is an essential component. So cloud, if you look at cloud adoption, it is a layered approach, it is a nuanced approach. Previously, organizations were focused only on migration, but today you have this cloud adoption strategy where companies are very much moving beyond cloud first to a workload first approach. These are my applications. I need to make sure that it meets the performance, security, and cost requirements. And that's why it lends very well itself to a particular type of environment or infrastructure. And that's where I'm going to put it in. So they take a very workload-centric approach when it comes to cloud adoption. So cloud adoption strategy is changing a lot today, and it's becoming a lot more nuanced. And there are multiple layers to it as well. So companies are now taking a broader approach where the C-suite is trying to collaborate with many different stakeholders to think about cloud governance early on at the strategy stage. They're thinking about what our risks are, what is our risk appetite to adopt cloud, and translating those risks into business policies and IT policies, and then enforcing those policies and monitoring them. So cloud governance is very much around security, data management, and also cost management. So governance is across the board. And operations is very much putting that into practice, putting those governance capabilities and ensuring that the cloud environment is extremely resilient. So you need to think about the business continuity, disaster recovery, and availability capabilities, but also make sure that there is enough provisions to have visibility and continuous monitoring, which this idea of observability, like making everything observable, is becoming very important for organizations. And then you can identify the functions and the processes that need to be automated and standardized, and to deliver that consistent end user experience. So what are the key cloud capabilities that organizations are investing in today? So we have all these different, we very much live in an ops world, right? So companies are thinking about SecOps. It has always been front and center. In any research or survey we do, security stands out front and center. So it's not a surprise to see that high up there. Companies are also looking to invest in cloud governance. And that means investing in a team of people, creating those governance charters, and just looking at how they can operate very well. And then they're also looking at automation and orchestration tools. So that's very much the technology related investment, and thinking about taking that one step further with automated AI and ML capabilities. So they're trying to take it one step further with AI ops, and also looking at FinOps. So why is FinOps important? What are the big trigger points apart from what's happening on the macroeconomic side? Companies are also finding that a lot of their cloud spend could be optimized. There is a lot more room to optimize their cloud spend, because more than 90% of organizations admit that they're currently overspending in public cloud. So FinOps, 52% of organizations have adopted FinOps to kind of optimize that spend. And although more than half of organizations we surveyed said they have adopted FinOps, but a lot of them are still very much in very early stages of this journey. Because it's a long journey, it's a continuous journey. Companies have to start somewhere. So they have identified these zombie resources, idle instances, and they have shut them down. So that's very much the first step, and that's where they are at. But FinOps is a whole cultural strategy thing that companies have to think about on a long-term basis to create that culture of collaboration between different stakeholders. But the devil is not in the detail. The devil is very much in the direction that organizations are going, where FinOps is becoming a very important consideration to make sure that they are not just adopting cloud successfully, but they're living successfully in the cloud as well. So we also asked companies, we delved a little bit deeper in terms of technology investments. We asked them, what are the modern operational and management capabilities you are investing in? And as you can see, all these management and operational capabilities, whether it's security, whether it's AI ops, whether it's automation or orchestration, companies are investing in, like I showed in the previous slide. But what's interesting here is that when you look at the use of these technologies and capabilities at scale, they're not happening at that rapid pace, right? Companies are adopting these, but then they are just getting stuck somewhere in the middle, because only a few of them are able to make that transition to use it extensively, because it's only when you use it extensively across your estate can you actually reap or yield a lot of benefits from those cloud ops tools. So it's very much important, and it's one of the top priorities for organizations to make sure that they mature in their use of these capabilities. IDC and NetApp did a paper, a business value paper on the importance of cloud ops and how some organizations that have adopted cloud ops and FinOps and cloud governance capabilities have actually reaped a lot of rewards, and how they have delivered those business value. So some of the things that stood out for me from that paper was, the first one very much was this improved public cloud resource management, right? Now the companies that were practicing cloud ops at a mature level were able to make sure that they could manage their public cloud resources a lot more efficiently, and then that boosted their confidence of accelerating their cloud journey. Then they started leveraging automation and other capabilities a lot more, and that had a huge benefit on the productivity side of things. So whether it's the infrastructure staff, whether it's the DevOps staff, whether it's the site reliability engineers, companies started to see improved productivity, because automation took away a lot of manual tasks away from them, so they could focus on a lot more strategic tasks, and they were not just fighting fires or keeping the lights on. They were doing something a lot more strategic that just improved their productivity. So there was this huge business value that goes beyond just cost savings for a lot of organizations. And that really stood out to me. And of course, in current times, payback is very important. So having that, optimizing the operational costs, making sure that you get more value for money, was high on the agenda, and they were able to reap those benefits. John, I just want to bring you in here to see if you had a chance to look at this business value paper that IDC did for NetApp, and if there were any business benefits that jumped out to you.
Yeah, definitely. There were some really interesting things that I saw in the paper as well, and many of them, were along the lines of what you were mentioning there. I think another thing that came out was, getting, more efficiency out of each hour you put into cloud, each dollar you put into cloud, and each person who's working on cloud. And so that comes, from things that allow you to deploy applications, more efficiently. It comes from things that allow you to reduce the amount of time you need to spend on decisions about how to optimize the use of resources. And it comes from being able to, have that flexibility. Like that was, I think, another thing that came out is how do you make sure that, you're able to keep up with the demands for flexibility, because demands on applications change, because, business needs could change, and because your resources can change. So those were all, I think, other things that I saw that, were very interesting to see brought out in that study that IDC did.
Very cool. So let's shift gears a tiny bit and focus a little bit more on FinOps, which has now become a key imperative. I have a set of quotes from our CIO advisory board and all the C-suite executives that we talk to. They tell us time and time again that they are spending a lot more on the cloud than they did before the pandemic. Some intentional, some some out of shock. So like there was this organization that said that their cloud spend had increased 35x. So they probably started from a very low number, but it increased 35x. And to a large extent, although that was a big jump in their IT spend, they were seeing a lot more benefits, right? So their innovation was boosted, the productivity of their teams was boosted as well. So they really saw a lot more benefits. They were okay to spend, but they just wanted to make sure that they are doing it right in the cloud. So that there are three different quotes that I have highlighted here. One company head of technology, he said that they migrated the IT environment to the cloud, basically to save on capital expenses, but then realized that cloud economics is a lot more complex. They could not use their traditional budgeting processes or their purchase order management, all those technologies to manage their cloud costs. So they realized that they need to adapt their processes. They need to look at newer ways to manage their cloud costs. So thinking about cloud economics as a whole had become very important for that company. Another VP of IT at a global automotive company, she said that cloud value realization is a key focus area for them, because they wanted to track their cloud cost and consumption patterns in a meaningful way to talk to other stakeholders in the business and see where they could optimize. And then the last one also talks about heavy focus on efficiency, which was the word of the year for a lot of CIOs. And they wanted a lot more predictability. So how do we budget well in the cloud? How do we make sure that we're able to forecast our spend? Because that's very important for us as we plan our future. And can we do some kind of sensitivity analysis where interest rates go up or energy prices go up or cloud prices go up? How do we make sure that we know we can plan for all these different scenarios and have control on our cloud spend? We at IDC predict that these complexities of digital business and IT budget pressures is actually going to drive 7 in 10 of G1000 companies by 2024 to increase FinOps maturity and implement all these capabilities like granular chargebacks, granular showback, benchmarking capabilities, and having multiple ways to optimize their cloud spend. So it is very much front and center for a lot of organizations in their thinking. A lot of companies are looking at the FinOps Foundation to have some kind of standardization in what they do, right? So they're looking at the FinOps framework from the FinOps Foundation, because then what happens is they all can talk the same language. There is some kind of consistency and standardization in how they are evolving their FinOps capabilities, and they have somewhere to benchmark, so they can look at what maturity looks like and they can assess themselves and then progress. Because if everyone did it their own way, it becomes very difficult to benchmark. So companies are using the FinOps Foundation framework to make progress or adopt those capabilities. So there are three different phases in the FinOps framework. The first one is inform, then there's optimize, and then there's operate. And all three of them, it's a continuous loop. It's not a linear development program. You have to make progress across all these different phases in a very aligned way. Inform is very much about getting that visibility. Optimize is about better understanding of your cloud pricing, cloud usage, to just make sure that you're making the right decisions. And operate, I see it very much as the cultural side, where everyone takes accountability, people are coming together and collaborating to make those right decisions, and centralizing the billing, but distributing cloud decisions. So governance and cultural management is a key part of that phase. So it's inform, optimize, and operate, and companies have to make progress across all these three phases. John, now I know you talk a lot about the three phases of FinOps Foundation, these three phases in the framework as well, right? So wondered if you have any thoughts from your customer conversations.
Yeah, I think definitely we hear the FinOps Foundation framework come up quite a bit. And I think one of the things that people often ask is, how do I think about like benefiting from FinOps regardless, and from tooling and such, regardless of where I am in those journeys. Maybe I, as an organization, I know that, it might take me a while to get through all stages of this journey, but how do I really think about like building my way into seeing those benefits, even in those early stages? And so sometimes, like you mentioned, it's just how do I even just get visibility and understand those? But how do I also accelerate my ability to optimize those costs? Those are a lot of the conversations that we definitely have as people try to think about how to do this, but also to do it in a way that isn't, something that becomes a huge project and something that's perceived as something that will take them a very long time to really realize the full benefit of.
Yeah, absolutely. That visibility is a very important step, right? And only then can you get that confidence to make sure that you are able to use different kind of pricing that's available in the cloud, whether you want to go for the savings plan, whether you want to go for reserved instances, how you can bring in the spot instances and really have a pool of resources. And over time, I think mature organizations, what they are ultimately trying to do is that we will buy from the cloud vendors all these different types of resources, and then we will push it to the business as they want these capabilities, but then we will charge a single price for the business. So the business doesn't have to worry about spot instances or reserved instances or savings plan. They just say, go and tell the IT team that we need resources to build these applications, and they just get a set of resources. It simplifies that conversation so much more, and that's why it accelerates the speed of the business, whereas the IT then absorbs all the differences in the cost, because they can plan and forecast and budget so well, because they understand the patterns and the usage and the cloud costs, that they buy these different instances and bill it on a consistent basis. I think that's what matured chargeback environment looks like. But a lot of companies are a long way away from that, but that's where they're trying to get to. So FinOps can very much help the C-suite, not just the IT teams, but the overall C-suite to overcome their cloud cost challenges. So what are the key cloud cost challenges? The three ones that companies highlighted to us was, the first one was very much this lack of best practice guidance on how to optimize the cloud spend, right? John, I think you had alluded to it as well. Where do I start? How do I start? I just need to make sure that I get better at this. Lack of hygiene is a very important aspect that came up, where 10 to 30% of the total cloud spend was categorized as waste. I think I previously highlighted where 92% of organizations said that they were wasting some amount of money in the cloud. And we think it's between 10 and 30%. And some organizations alarmingly said that 40% of their cloud spend is waste. So for every dollar that you spend in the cloud, if 40 cents is going waste, then I think there is plenty of room to optimize, and you need to do that, because then there will be huge amounts of savings, especially when cloud accounts for a big chunk of not just the IT budgets, but even revenue for a lot of organizations. And lack of control came out as the third important factor, where companies said that they admitted that it very much is difficult to control the costs. And that is one of the key reasons my cloud adoption program has failed. So roughly about 50% of organizations say or admit that their cloud journeys have not been as successful as they initially anticipated. And there are operational challenges, there are cultural challenges, but cloud costs, spiraling cloud costs were one of the big reasons for cloud failures. There are different ways to start. What we're beginning to see is Cloud Center of Excellence is taking the center stage, or multi-cloud centers of excellence, where companies are trying to create this cross-functional cloud-focused team with some kind of C-suite representative, because you need that sponsor, you need an executive sponsor to make sure you carry this forward. And the Cloud Center of Excellence is also trying to create this balance between speed and stability, right? It's very much an art to manage the both. And the CCOE, which hears both sides of the stories, is trying to see how they can balance the two and make sure that the cloud spend is optimized. And the primary goal that the Cloud Center of Excellence is trying to drive is very much around managing cloud costs. So they're taking FinOps as a key discipline that they want to lead within that organization, and also broader cloud ops, like improving cloud performance, improving workload performance, security, governance, as well as better aligning business outcome with cloud strategy. So all the three layers of the cloud, whether it was operations, strategy, or governance, they are trying to make sure that they take a key role. So we asked organizations, what are the benefits of having a Cloud Center of Excellence? And if you can see, all the ones highlighted in green are FinOps related. So 6 out of 10 or 12 benefits is very much around getting maximum value for money and getting that cost optimization right. We see FinOps very much as a shared responsibility, like everything else is in the cloud. And this is something that companies forget. Sometimes they think that it is all their fault. Sometimes they think it's all the vendor's fault. It's not. Cloud FinOps is very much a shared responsibility, where cost efficiency of the cloud is very much in the hands of the provider, where they can bring in much more transparency, make it easier to understand the bill, have a lot more tools and resources that are easy to understand to optimize the use of cloud and track the use of cloud. So that is called cost efficiency of the cloud. But cost efficiency in the cloud is very much a user's responsibility, or the company's responsibility who is using the cloud, where they need to right scale, they need to have clear SLAs, they need to have this culture of accountability across the board. They need to architect their environment right before moving to the cloud, and think about egress charges, think about which instances are right for them, and set those policies and guardrails, inform the developers the right way to develop applications, and a lot more. So there is cost efficiency of the cloud as well as cost efficiency in the cloud, and companies have to think about all this together to make sure that they mature in their FinOps journey. I also wanted to bring in other business value highlights that we found in the paper. One thing that stood out for me beyond the initial broader business value was this benefit of automation for the IT organizations, right? So companies were thinking about how important automation is and how much benefits it has yielded for them to augment further business value that we previously saw. So companies are talking about, we are not able to manage auto scaling. Things are running out of control. How do we make sure that we monitor the spikes? We know how to bring in resource efficiency. It's all very complex, but identifying it, getting visibility, and quickly automating the right processes has really helped us get a lot more value from this. John, what were your thoughts on some of the comments on automation made in the business value paper?
Yeah, so I think some of the key things that we saw about the automation was, one of the values of it is it gives you a way to be consistent across all of your environments. And so as opposed to, you focus on like one application, optimizing that, and then you move on to a different application, or you look at one deployment or one business unit, you can actually provide a standard, consistent, governed way to use automation to make sure you're getting those values across all the different places you deploy. So that was definitely one thing I saw. Another thing I saw is also, I saw a lot of ties into how to be more agile. So using automation allowed people to be more agile about being able to deploy applications faster, to be able to scale up and down more efficiently and effectively and more rapidly. And so a lot of that flexibility and responsiveness was also a key benefit of automation. And I definitely didn't see someone saying like automation, replaces people. I think what I saw in the paper was people saying automation makes people more productive. And so giving people the right tools allows them to focus on high value things and to use the tools to automate, standardize, govern, and repeat, some of the things that otherwise would overwhelm them.
Yeah, it very much augments the human capital than replace it, right? So it's very much an and strategy. Super. So just wanted to touch also on this idea of personas and the stakeholders required for getting cloud ops, cloud governance, and FinOps right. So you can very much start small. You can start with a one full-time employee. All you need is a passion to make sure you get things right. It could even be somebody like an asset manager in your organization who says, look, I really am interested in FinOps. I need to make sure I can help you get this right. So he or she can work part-time into looking or getting some visibility, and over time build a group of people. So it can really start as small as you want. So what we need is over time have a practitioner lead, right? One person which is a full-time employee. That person is fully focused on ops, talking to ops, dev, IT, finance teams, and he or she is a jack of all trades, right? They drive that company-wide agenda to make everyone take the cost seriously. Then you have inputs from the cloud engineering and infrastructure operations team. Then you have the DevOps manager who need to participate to understand how little code changes and decisions can impact cost. If they try to use serverless for some application development, how does that decision impact overall cost management for an organization? So they need to think about, as they make these changes, not just the business uses, but also the financial implications of their decisions. Procurement has to be deeply involved as well to just take those contractual requirements and read through them and build those relationships and move beyond just consumption commitment to something like a strategic commitment with the cloud vendor. And then the finance team for the first time is now collaborating with the IT team to get FinOps right. And of course, there is the business users and the executive sponsor. As one CIO tip we heard from organization that has practiced this well, where they talk about having this well-balanced cross-functional team is very important for success, so that you hear all the different sides of the stories and make sure you make the right decision, because cost optimization is important, whilst at the same time it is important to give the developers and the business the tools and the features that they need, regardless of how expensive it is. So IT needs to find a way to see what the requirements are, because otherwise cloud is not going to yield the benefits that companies want. So 60% of IT departments have adopted FinOps. This is another research that we did. So previously we saw how 52% said that they have adopted FinOps, but when we talk to IT personas, there is a lot more awareness around them, because sometimes companies says, I am doing cost optimization, but I did not know it is called FinOps. So companies sometimes practice it. So there's more awareness of the right terms and jargons for the IT teams, which is why we see more number of personas within the IT department saying yes to adopting FinOps. And on the right side, if you look at the top investment areas, there also we are seeing that cloud cost assessment and cloud FinOps has been identified as one of the key areas to increase investment. And as we talk about personas and stakeholders, it's very important to talk about this culture of breaking the silos. I spoke about this messy middle, and how do you realize value of the cloud in that messy middle, right? So it's all about this culture of breaking the silos, where developers are not just thinking about developing applications on day zero, or the cloud migration team is not just thinking about pushing applications to the cloud, but then it's a holistic discussion where companies think about developing the software in the right way, using automation and management capabilities to run that successfully in the cloud, and focus on optimization. So build, run, compete, and all three are important, and you need to break down the silos and not think about these as different environments, but just think about developing something in a very hardened environment that meets the governance, security, and cost requirements in the long term, because that is the only sustainable way to accelerate your cloud journey. John, I wanted to bring you in here because you work with a lot of customers and they adopt your technology. So how do your customers see benefits?
Yeah, and so one of the key themes that we've seen is that people want to figure out, how can I make this be something that I can build into my operations, and how can I do this continuously and scalably? Certainly, I think all of us who've had kids are familiar with the challenge of telling our kids, like, you need to clean up your room. And that can be like, you need to clean up your cloud costs, you need to standardize your deployments. It's something that you get your kid to focus on for a weekend, and you make big progress, and then for the next 3 months they don't do anything to keep it clean, and so as a result it gets messy again very quickly. Costs are very similar. If you don't think about how to build this into your operations, it's something that you might focus on for a point in time, improve, and then you don't reap those benefits and continue to maintain those benefits. So the set of technologies and tools that we've assembled as a portfolio is really focused on, how do I embed this into your operations so that you're continuously optimizing across those different dimensions and meeting those requirements. So whether that's thinking about, how do I actually optimize the infrastructure? How do I think about where I choose reserved instances, spot instances, savings plans, things like that? How do I think about the ways that I think about these processes that are needed to automate and make operations more efficient? Things like decisions around scaling, things like simplifying deployment, things like how do I do that across all the different dimensions I have? And then how do I do that specifically for my applications? How do I make sure that I'm deploying them efficiently? How do I make sure that I can actually scale that out? How do I make sure that I can modernize those, but still be conscious of doing that in a cost-efficient way that also meets the security requirements, that also ensures that I can do this repeatedly in governed ways across all of my environments? So our suite works across, whether you're working with VMs directly and trying to figure out how to optimize your purchasing of those and the price plans you use, to whether you're using platforms such as Kubernetes, to, if you think about how to make your teams more efficient, to if you're thinking about, how are you actually building and operating these applications in the cloud, open source and other types of applications. That's really what our suite has been built for. And an important part of this is, how do you do this in a consistent way across all of your environments? Whether it's all of your environments within one cloud provider, or all of your environments across multiple cloud providers. So we're giving people a way to simplify the number of different tools that they need to use to be able to embed this operational continuous optimization into their environments. So that those are the conversations that we've been finding with customers are a very important part about how they're thinking about this going forward.
Fantastic. I really like the analogy of telling the children to clean the room, although ours never listen. And they feel that it's okay to be messy until they don't find the thing that they want, right? So before the CFO comes knocking on your door and asks for that thing, that's when you start to clean up. So it's better to start early and think about embedding that in your thought process, right? And you also mentioned Kubernetes. I think that's one thing we're beginning to hear a lot more from the C-suite, where they say the container cost management is even more complex. So once we start that journey, there's so much benefit that is to be had in that environment. So if we can extend our FinOps capabilities seamlessly into the container environment, it'll be hugely beneficial. Do we have to learn something new for that? So it was great to see you touch on that as well. I want to just bring in this final point about the actual tangible benefits that we saw come through in the business value paper as well. So these are some real tangible benefits, right? If you think about payback, that is top of mind for companies, we found that companies reported more than 600% of return on investment. The payback time was as little as 4 months. For a lot of organizations, that is unheard of as they think about these long-term technology transformation. And then they actually saw a 21% reduced public cloud-related spend. So what it did was that as they reduced the spend, they had that money to reinvest in the cloud on the innovation features. So that helped them accelerate, let's say, their AI journey in the cloud. So it was very much used for promoting innovation, because IT got a lot more confidence and buy-in from the boardroom to continue to reinvest, because the boardroom thought that they were doing the right thing. So reduced public cloud spend is actually giving you a lot more money or a lot more leverage to then invest in the right cloud capabilities. And then companies also reported agility to deploy newer computer resources, more productive teams. So a lot of tangible benefits, but a lot of software benefits as well, which is very important for the business. What is my time to market? How productive is my DevOps team? Can I retain talent and skills, and so that I can outcompete my competition, because there's this big skills shortage or skills or talent war, as we call it. So how do we make sure we keep our developer team motivated and retain them, so that productivity and giving them the tools they like and making them perform high value strategic tasks by using automation and taking away those day-to-day manual tasks was very important to boost productivity as well. So there were lots of tangible benefits. There was soft benefits as well. But was there anything that stood out to you, John, in terms of tangible benefits?
Yeah, I think one of the key things was, how do we shift where people are spending their time to the higher value things that we can have them work on? And so, we've seen these waves, throughout, the evolution of IT, where things that previously people spent a lot of time on, new technologies emerge that allow them to think higher level. And so, whereas, we used to have server admins who would focus a lot on how do I make sure the hardware is all connected and running properly and not overheating. When you move to cloud, now I actually take those people and I focus them more on how do I deploy things faster and more efficiently. And in the same way, what I saw in some of the statistics here is, people looking to see how do I make my teams more efficient by taking some of the things that before were consuming a huge amount of their time and using technology and automation to be able to allow them to focus on higher value things. One example that I remember thinking was really a good illustration of it was that one customer, we talked to their team, their ops team, and they had a person who would spend a day per week just making sure that after each deploy, the environment was, re-optimized. And so, that was something that was taking up a significant amount of that person's time. By bringing in software that could help to address that, that freed up a lot of that person's time to think, about how do I actually, scale, what we're deploying, how we're getting it into different regions, and spend less time on basically re-optimizing, every time that they deploy. And so I think that was another example that tied into some of the benefits that we're seeing here.
Awesome. I really like when you can connect tech investment to the business value, and that to tangible business value, right? Because people talk about business value all the time, but their KPIs are so different. Sometimes they're even competing KPIs. So what are you looking for? What are your objectives, and how are you able to realize those objectives is a very important thing. Cool. I think that's pretty much my last slide.
That's great. Very informative. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your research, and the information you've gathered. Just a couple of questions that would be great to hear your thoughts on. So you mentioned, of course, a lot of things that we've been dealing with in terms of stresses and challenges. And we've gone through almost whiplash where, in pandemic, many people were asked to scale things up really quickly as business moved online, as interactions moved online, as people worked remotely. Other organizations had to shrink. And now, in the current economic environment, people are also being asked to make a lot of changes. How do you think that you're seeing people change their thinking about how they approach FinOps and CloudOps, given that they're being asked to go through this very volatile environment?
It's a great question, and it's a very sensitive one for organizations as well, right? So it has never been more important, and a lot of organizations are now not just thinking about doing well for themselves, but also doing good, right? So they want to make sure that layoffs probably is the last thing that they want to do. So where can I find optimization? Where can I cut costs before letting people go? That is one reason why a lot of C-suites are now looking at FinOps as well. So they're saying if we optimize our costs, we have a lot more savings. If we do a lot more automation, we can train the staff that we have to do different things, so we can upskill them or de-skill them, right? Like, can we help our developer team to develop a lot more skills around analytics, so they can do low-level data analytics as they develop applications, because now they have a lot more free time because they're using automation. And that way we don't have to hire 6 or 7 different data scientists. We can use just one, we can hire just one data scientist and use them for what we need. But then the developers are so talented now that they can do low-level data analytics themselves. So they're trying to de-skill their staff as well by investing in FinOps, because then you can use the capabilities like automation to do a lot more. So it's becoming more important.
Got it. Yeah. Another question I'd be interested in hearing kind of your experience and perspective on is that there certainly are a lot of competing initiatives that organizations have. And so things around sustainability, for example, and efficiency in that aspect are an important thing. How does that connect in with the way that people think about, FinOps and CloudOps? Like, do those two things, are they separate projects, or are there ways in which people are trying to think about how to help benefit some of their other initiatives like that in the context of FinOps and CloudOps?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it should definitely be thought of as complementary to each other. When if you look at sustainability goals, a lot of different things feed into that sustainability bucket for an organization, right? You cannot have a team in isolation trying to say we are going to be more sustainable. They have to look at their, business travel and see how they can be sustainable in that environment. They have to look at their IT footprint and see how they can optimize that. And that IT footprint optimization is a key contributor to your sustainability initiatives, because as you get more visibility, as you right scale better, as you optimize your IT environment better, you can also create those audit reports and share it with your ESG team to see how IT teams are actually taking the lead in contributing to the sustainability goals of the organizations. Because many times IT is seen as this carbon burning organization that doesn't really care about anything else except for just making sure things are running. But no, they are thinking about it a lot more widely. And we see a lot more connection between FinOps and GreenOps as it's now coming together a lot more closer, right? So the immediate benefits the immediate benefits of FinOps is very much around cost savings, but there is also strategic benefits which is contributing to this sustainability goals. I mean, the more you cut your zombie instances, your idle resources, the more you're saving and the more you can show it, right? And then you can also have a strategic conversation with your cloud vendor where you say, I'm not going to consume 1 million of just storage instances or server instances, because then just by virtue of having these resources, my developer team is doing something they shouldn't be doing. But can we have a lot more strategic conversation? Look, these are big environments that I would like to run using these kind of infrastructure capabilities. I'm not going to move this environment every year. It's a long-term decision. So can we talk strategically, and can I still have those economies of scale? But let's have a strategic conversation than instance consumption conversation, which my ESG team will not like. So we can have inputs from different angles, and it definitely is complementary.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because I see the same thing where people are trying to figure out, how do I connect these larger goals and initiatives with some of these things that are often thought of as tactical. Do I use a reserved instance or a spot instance is a very tactical question. But if you look at how do I maximize the value I get with the minimum resources in the most effective way, that is both a sustainability challenge that you're working to address, as well as a FinOps challenge, as well as a CloudOps challenge. So I also see how those connect.
No, you articulated it so much better. Yes, absolutely.
So one last question as we wrap up, and that is, we talked a little bit about how, you definitely don't want to overwhelm yourself by trying to take on FinOps as a huge project that requires a massive amount of investment and a huge amount of time to be successful in. So what are some of the things that you're seeing as lessons learned about how our companies are effectively, going through, and what are some of the pitfalls that people sometimes get themselves trapped into as they try to mature their approach to CloudOps and FinOps?
That is such an important question, right? Because a lot of organizations believe that unless they get a certain degree of scale in the cloud, they don't need FinOps. But the sooner you start your FinOps thinking, the better it is for you. So there is, yesterday was a good time to start. So companies should start as soon as they possibly can. And you don't need a big team of certified FinOps professionals. It can be a small team just talking to each other, starting as a practice where they say, hey, what are your needs? Talk to developers, just a group of 3 or 4 people forming a cloud center of excellence and starting and understanding the patterns of usage, understanding what the board wants in terms of cloud adoption, and then seeing how they can adopt it by baking in this idea of cost optimization right from the start. At the design point is very important. So start soon and start small. So it's a long way. It's a continuous journey. Even those that create big teams are still on that learning curve. So you can definitely start small.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like, design for efficiency can be something you do at the very beginning, even when you're still at a small phase, because it sets you up, for being able to sustain that and grow that as you scale.
Exactly.
Great. So thank you so much, Archana. It's been very informative and insightful. We really appreciate your helping us out today. For those of you who've joined, we will be following up with you. We can provide, the content for you to see. There's, in the links on the side, you can see that white paper, you can see some more information. But we really appreciate the time, and we really appreciate your insights, Archana.
Thank you very much, John. Great talking to you.
Thanks.
Bye.